We're going now to Luke chapter. Does anyone remember? Luke chapter 8. Are we up to 8 now? Still in Luke chapter 8. And we're up to verses 41, and we might make it through the end of the chapter if all goes well. Luke chapter 8 and verse 41. We'll just read through quickly, and then we'll go through this story a bit more. And so while we will be reading it, I want you to think like you've never heard this story before, any part of it, because too often we come to the Bible and we say, I've heard this, or I've heard a part of this, or I know where this story is going, and we switch off our brain. But I want us to think about it the way that Luke's hearers, or those who are reading it for the first time, would have taken this and understood it. So we're going to read starting in verse 41. And behold, there came a man named Jairus, and he was a ruler of the synagogue. And he fell down at Jesus' feet, and besought him that he would come into his house. For he had one only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she lay a-dying. But as he went, the people thronged him. And a woman having an issue of blood 12 years, which had spent all her living upon physicians, neither could be healed of any, came behind him and touched the border of his garment. And immediately her issue of blood staunched. And Jesus said, Who touched me? When all denied, Peter and they that were with him said, Master, the multitude throng thee and press thee, and sayest thou, Who touched me? And Jesus said, Somebody hath touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me. And when the woman saw that she was not hid, she came trembling, and falling down before him, she declared unto him before all the people for what cause she had touched him, and how she was healed immediately. And he said unto her, Daughter, be of good comfort, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace. While he yet spake, there cometh one from the ruler of the synagogue's house, saying to him, Thy daughter is dead, trouble not the master. But when Jesus heard it, he answered him, saying, Fear not, believe only, and she shall be made whole. And when he came into the house, he suffered no man to go in, save Peter, James, and John, and the father and mother of the maiden. And all wept and bewailed her. But he said, Weep not, she is not dead, but sleepeth. And they laughed him to scorn, knowing that she was dead. And he put them all out, and took her by the hand, and called, saying, Maid, arise. And her spirit came again, and she arose straightway, and he commanded to give her meat. And her parents were astonished. But he charged them that they should tell no man what was done. We have here a twofold story. We have here an exciting early church rendition of a But Wait, There's More story. You can imagine the first time you were hearing this story, or for this man Jairus, as he had come to Jesus, and then Jesus is thronged by this multitude. And this other incident happens, and it's a delay, and you can just imagine his impatience. He was sitting on the very front of we're sitting on the very front of our seat, listening. What's going to happen next? Is Jesus going to make it to heal this little girl? You can almost feel that tension, and that's why Luke wrote it this way. He could have just as easily written how Jesus raised the girl from the dead and not told us about all of the things leading up to and interrupting it. But he put that in there so that we could get a sense of the urgency that this man had, and then his impatience, and the fact that there was a delay that cost his little girl her life, and how hopeless that man would have been. We need to look at these characters just a little bit. Jairus. We're told a number of things about him. He was a man who was a ruler of the synagogue. He was a powerful and well-respected man. He had authority. He was important. He was an important person. Not only that, but he probably was rich. He had a house with household servants, and someone was able to come from his house to tell him not to trouble Jesus. So he was well-to-do. But none of that mattered to him. He came to Jesus, and notice his attitude. He sought Jesus out personally, and he fell at Jesus' feet. He did not come to Jesus and demand that Jesus help him. He came begging. He was basically throwing his last roll of the dice to save his daughter. He was taking his last chance to possibly save his daughter. Notice what it says about his daughter there in verse 42. It says, "And she lay a-dying." We don't often come face to face with death anymore. My wife has mentioned some things at the nursing home, and I thought to myself, I've never been in the room with someone who was dying like that day and seen them go. That's never happened to me. It's something that happens away from us. We are separated from it too often. But at that time, they all knew what dying looked like. Not only that, but Luke, he was a physician. He knew what questions to ask when he heard this story. He probably asked questions like, so what was going on with this girl? How was she sick? What were her symptoms? Was she pale? Was she not breathing? What was going on? And he probably asked all of those kinds of questions. And his verdict, and the verdict of all the people around her, was that she lay a-dying. There was little hope left. In fact, Jairus wasn't going to seek out another doctor or anything else. There was no other hope left, just Jesus. And he fell at Jesus' feet. He fell at his feet. Why, you might ask? Why would he take that posture of falling at his feet? Was he just very clumsy and fell down? No. He was showing that he was not as important as Jesus. He was showing that there was nothing he could bring that could entice Jesus. He didn't come with, here's my bag of gold, please come and rescue my daughter. He came and begged Jesus with his open arms, holding on to Jesus' feet, saying, please help. That word besought, we don't use it very much anymore. It means to beg or to plead. You can see the tears in his eyes as he says, my only daughter lies dying. You can hear the cry in his voice as he begs Jesus, please, please help. Jesus was moved and started to go with Jairus. Now I'm sure Jairus did not take Jesus the roundabout route. There's many ways you can get from one point to the other in any city. And I'm sure Jairus was taking the most direct route possible. He had found Jesus and he was going to take him straight to his house. The shortest way possible. But as we've already mentioned, there was a throng of people. There were so many people around that it got hard to walk without tripping over someone. And in that, there was this interruption. What are some of the things we know about this woman? Well, actually, not very much. We don't know her name. We don't know her station. We don't know whether she was rich or poor, married, widowed. We know nothing about her. What we do know is that she had had this disease, this problem, for 12 years. Now, it's a little bit interesting. There's some parallels we can draw. And so we're going to stop for just a moment here and draw a few parallels between the two situations we're faced with at this moment. One is a little girl, 12 years old. Another is a woman who has been suffering for 12 years. There is also the attitude. We already mentioned how the man fell down at Jesus' feet, but this lady also fell down at Jesus' feet. And if we go to verse 47, she came trembling and fell down before him. She also realized that she was not worthy of the great gift she had been given, that healing that she had received. And she fell down before him. So there's this attitude or this posture before Jesus. We have two women, one 12-year-old girl, one a woman who was suffering for 12 years. We have people falling at the feet of Jesus with that posture of humility and just overwhelmed with thankfulness on the part of the one and on hopefulness on the part of the other. I also want us to see that there was no hope left except for Jesus. In verse 43, we read that this woman had spent all her living upon physicians. We don't know how much it was, but it was all of it. We don't know if it was she was a rich person and sold houses, lands, animals, all of that to try and solve this problem, but she had spent everything. And she could not be healed of any. They had tried everything. I'm sure she had tried every crazy idea. Things that she's like, I'm sure this isn't going to work, but anything is better than trying nothing, because right now I am without hope. And so when she came to Jesus, she had no hope. There was no physician that could help her. There was no person who could meet her need. Jairus also came to this point. If we go to verse 49, thy daughter is dead, trouble not the master. Jairus had probably already exhausted all of the physicians in the area, trying to get help, and he had then come to Jesus as his last-ditch effort, but now his daughter was dead. Whatever hope that he had was probably dashed at that word. When that person from his house comes and says, thy daughter is dead. That would have been it. He would have been devastated. But Jesus says, fear not. And that changes everything. You see, these situations are very similar. We have 12 years, we have that they're both women, that there's an attitude of humility, and there's an attitude of hope, and that their hope was almost gone, and that their hope, that last bit of hope, was in Jesus. We looked at a few weeks ago how you only need a mustard seed faith. Small, tiny bit of faith, and God will do great things out of it. Well, your last bit of hope needs to be in Jesus. If you had even just that little last bit of hope against hope, that Jesus possibly could rescue me, God will heal you. He will make you whole. Again, I'm not talking about physical healing. God doesn't always heal us physically. In this situation, God heals physically, and he draws two people, at least, to come to him, to follow him. But I want us to see the results of their faith. In verse 48, the woman who was healed of the issue of blood, the result is that Jesus said to her, daughter, be of good comfort, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace. You see, she found more than what she was looking for. She wanted help from a disease, a suffering that she had had for 12 years. And Jesus provided that. But he provided more. He also provided her peace. And he said her faith had made her whole. Jesus was not just talking about her physical body, but that her faith in him was rescuing her. We have in verse 50, Jesus said to Jairus, "Fear not, believe only, and she shall be made whole." And in verse 55, her spirit came again and she arose straightway. You see, Jesus was able to do the miraculous because there was that little bit of faith, that hope against hope. Let's go back now to this woman. We've seen, we've already kind of touched on a lot of the little bits of it, but let's look in more detail. We've seen that she had this issue of blood for 12 years and she'd spent all of her living, but what was the actions that she took? Verse 44, she came up behind him and touched the border of his garment. I remember as a child looking at the little pictures depicting this, how you could see this woman reaching forward, maybe even on her hands and knees, trying to push through the crowd and just touch the very bottom of his robe. Just to barely touch it, because that's as close as she could get. She was very full of faith, but also at the time very fearful. And at the same time, she pushed through. She took some effort to push through these people and to get to Jesus. She touched him. And I want us to see the outcome. It says immediately her issue of blood was staunched. You see, she reached out because she had heard Jesus can heal in person, by word, by touch. He can heal. And so she reached out with faith and touched his garment. And immediately she was healed. That's an amazing kind of healing. Jesus had healed her. Now comes Jesus' response, which might surprise you. I know it surprised me when I thought about it. Why did Jesus stop? Why didn't he just press on and go to this girl who was dying? Wasn't that of a great importance? Well, Jesus stopped because, as I've already mentioned, there was more at stake than this woman's bodily affliction. Jesus wanted her to have peace. You see, she had been in this painful, suffering state for a long time, but there was also stigma. That is, people looked down on her because of her situation. They would have avoided her. They wouldn't have wanted to have anything to do with her. Not only was she in pain, but she also would have been very alone. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" Not because he was angry, not because he wanted to destroy her, but because he wanted to give her an additional gift. It is interesting to see here the response of the people around. Everyone immediately started saying, "Oh, it wasn't me, it wasn't me." I don't know if you've ever been accused of something and immediately you rise up, "No, that wasn't me." That was the response of everyone in the crowd around Jesus. And as Peter and the other disciples said, there's a lot of people around here all pushing and shoving as we're going. It's not surprising that someone touched Jesus. But Jesus said, "Who touched me?" And everyone immediately was like, "No, it's not me, it's not me." And they were so loud that even if she had spoken at that point, I don't think anyone would have heard. She would have had to have yelled out to have been heard. Jesus said, "Who touched me?" And Peter and the others rightly wondered, why would you ask that? In verse 46, Jesus gives his answer, though. "Somebody hath touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me. That is, Jesus knew that he had healed someone, even though all they had done is touch his garment. Now, I don't know if you've been in a large crowd. Not many of us have in recent days, but in a large crowd where you might be jostled on one side or the other, and to notice when someone touches, the bottom of your pants or the edge of your sleeve, you might not even notice, especially if you're on the move, trying to get to rescue this little girl. Surely the actual physical touch part of it would not have registered. But Jesus knew that he had healed someone. I don't think Jesus was asking because he didn't know who it was. He probably knew this woman by name. He probably could have said, "So-and-so, come up here." But he wanted her to come willingly, on her own. He wanted her to take those steps of faith rather than him just proving once again that he is powerful and God. He said, "I perceive virtue is gone out of me." This woman then realized she couldn't pretend that she had not received this great blessing. And so she came trembling and falling down before him. I don't know if you've ever had something wonderful happen to you. Maybe someone has given you a wonderful gift, or someone has helped you when you were close to death, or maybe you had a close call on the road. That happens to a lot of people. Someone almost swipes you and you get a little bit, the heart starts pumping, you're a little bit excitable there. And here, this woman is coming up, she's trembling. She's coming up in spite of being afraid, in spite of not knowing what Jesus is going to do. Is he going to take away the healing that he has given her because she took it from him instead of asking? Like, what's going to happen? She doesn't know. And she's coming up trembling and falling down before him, and she declares before him and all the people for what cause she had touched him. Now, her disease or her issue of blood, that would have been a very personal thing to be talking about. And she openly described what was wrong and what Jesus had done in healing her before everyone. This required a great deal of humility. She declared that she had come to him and that she had no hope except for him. And she touched his garment, and now she was healed immediately. Jesus then said unto her, "Daughter." Now, there's a familiarity there with that term. Jesus is calling her by a comforting name, daughter. He is not looking down at her. He's not, demeaning her by this. He is comforting in his words and in his tone. "Daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith hath made thee whole." Jesus promised that this wasn't a temporary fix for her physical problem, and that her soul could be at rest and she could go about her own way. I do wonder what happened to this woman. We don't have her name. We don't have the rest of her story. Where did she go? Sometimes you think about that. Where would she have gone? Would she have gone back home to whatever family she might have had? Would she have gone to the temple and given thanks to God? Would she have followed Jesus everywhere he went? We know there were a number of people, especially women, who had been helped, who followed Jesus from city to city, town to town. Maybe she also joined in with that group. We're not told. It's interesting to think about that. Jesus didn't tell her where he wanted her to go. He just said, wherever you're going, go in peace. Jesus offered her so much. This brings us back to the story of Jairus. And I'm sure he was impatient as Jesus stopped in the middle of the road on the way to heal his daughter. I'm sure he was a bit annoyed when no one stood up immediately and owned up to touching Jesus and stopping this great healer. But now, just as they're beginning to start on their way again, and before they've taken a step down the road, up comes this one and says, thy daughter is dead. Again, he would have been devastated. His world would have just collapsed. He would have needed help walking the rest of the way. Instead of him leading Jesus with hope towards his daughter, he would have been stumbling and needing someone to hold his hand and his arm to keep him upright, thinking that his daughter is dead and there is no hope left. Jesus' words would have been a comfort, and obviously Jairus, having seen this woman healed right before his eyes, would have had some hope left that Jesus might be able to do something. But generally, death is pretty permanent. You know, when someone dies, that's it. There's no more medicine can do. Well, they made it to Jairus' house. We don't have any more information. Maybe there were other interruptions. We're not told. But Jesus got there, and he goes in with Peter, James, and John, and the father and mother. That's it. Just those few to come into the room with him to where this little girl had died. What is the attitude of everyone around? Are they saying, oh, here's Jesus, maybe there's some hope left? No. They were weeping. They were crying. They were mourning that this girl was taken. In fact, when Jesus said, weep not, she is not dead but sleepeth, they laughed him to scorn. If there was any doubt that this girl had actually died, this would put it to rest. Everyone around knew that she was dead. She wasn't breathing. There was no life left in her. They laughed Jesus to scorn, knowing that he was dead. Not just thinking that she was dead, knowing that she was dead. Jesus put all of those people who were laughing him to scorn out, and took her by the hand, and called out, saying, Maid, arise. Jesus didn't do any fancy shenanigans. He didn't, call out her name 50 times and, wave incense around or any of that. Jesus didn't have some medical, tools or equipment and fancy vaccines to give her. Nothing. All he did was just hold her hand and call out for her to get up. Maid, arise. That's it. 2 words. Notice what it says. It doesn't just say that she got up, although that would be astounding enough. It says her spirit came again. Luke is acknowledging that this truly was a girl who was dead, and that her spirit had departed. She hadn't just fainted and then Jesus came in and she revived a bit. No, she was gone. Her spirit was not in her body until Jesus called out, Maid, arise. At that point, then her spirit came back. It says her spirit came again. It had gone, it came back. And she arose straightway. That is, she got up. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been sick. I'm sure each of us has, and if we haven't, we will. If you've ever been sick in any dangerous way, and you've been laid out on your bed because you're not able to get up, even if you start to get better, you do not immediately rise up and get out of the bed. But here this girl, she was dead, completely gone, and then the next minute she is getting out of bed as a 12-year-old, completely on her own, standing up. This is miraculous. This is amazing. This is something that has to be told year after year, generation after generation. Jesus raised this girl completely from the dead, and she got up immediately. She was not a ghost. The next thing that we learn is that Jesus told them to bring her some food. She was not a ghost. This wasn't that Jesus called her to rise up and then, there was some sort of apparition or she was a zombie walking around. No, she was back to being a healthy 12-year-old girl. And Jesus says, go give her some food. Kids are often hungry, just in case you wonder. If they're whinging or being annoying, they might be tired, but often they're hungry. And that just happens a lot. Well, this girl would have been hungry after dying and coming back. She was hungry. So Jesus says, go, get her some food. I want us to see the parents' response. So Jairus and his wife, they were astonished. That word astonished means that they were standing there with their mouth open like this. They weren't moving. They weren't thinking. They were just bewildered. Their mind had stopped. And their body had stopped. They were astonished. They couldn't believe that difference. I don't know how long this girl had been sick. You don't normally go from being a healthy 12-year-old to lying dying in one day. It can happen, but she probably had gone through some stages of getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And so they were astonished because she was not just better, but she was 100% better. And they were amazed that their little girl was returned to them. So we've seen today Jairus, a very wealthy, prominent man, falling at the feet of Jesus, begging for his help. We've seen a woman who was suffering for 12 years, falling at the feet of Jesus. And all hope was gone. And then Jesus answered their call. He reached out and touched them. Well, the woman reached out and touched him. But there was contact made between Jesus and those in need, and there was immediate results. As we close, we're going to look at verse 56 and note one thing. Jesus charged them, that is, these parents and their daughter, that they should tell no man what was done. You might wonder, why would Jesus do that? He had stopped in the middle of the road and basically let everyone know that this other woman had been healed. But he didn't want anyone to know that he could raise the dead. At this point, why is that? Well, Jesus wanted each to come to him in faith. He wanted everyone to come as these two had done. They had come to Jesus and begged for him to help, and then he had helped them. If Jesus was seen as the man who could raise the dead and all of that as his main task, then everyone would have come to him for all of that. All of my brother, my sister, my father, my wife, they died. And he would not have been able to go around teaching and preaching. Not only that, but Jesus didn't need to have the parents proclaiming it, because remember who was in the other room? A whole bunch of people who were just mourning the death of this girl that they are convinced was dead. And now she is walking out to get some food with her parents. They're not going to need to say anything. Everyone in that town is going to know that Jesus healed that girl from death. The parents and the daughter are not going to need to be spokespeople, because it's going to go out like a viral tweet. It's going to go everywhere. Everyone's going to hear about it. Everyone's going to know about it very quickly, because it was so amazing and so well seen. So many people witnessed it. Jesus wants your life to be like that. Who knew you before you were alive in Christ? There were people who saw you on the road to destruction. They've seen your life and the things that you've done. Those are the very same people that now should see an amazing difference that you've met Jesus. And you shouldn't have to do much in the way of proclaiming it. Now, we will go and tell people, but you shouldn't need to. People should see your life and say, God's done something there. Something has changed. They were dead. They were trapped by their sin, whatever it was, drinking, smoking, all kinds of sins that destroy, that are big and open, and ones that are quiet and hidden. Maybe they knew that you were addicted to lying or stealing. And then your life changed because you met Jesus. And everyone who knew you could tell you were dead. Now you're alive. That change will publish much faster and do more to let people know they need Jesus than any number of times you knock on a door or hand out a tract. A changed life is the best witness for who Jesus is and what he wants to do for others. So my challenge to you today is to remember these two stories. Don't give up hope. Continue to look to Jesus. And if you know Jesus as Savior, make sure your life is so different now that the change is easily seen by those around you. Let's close with a word of prayer.